Today is the memorial of Saint Anthony the Abbot, founder of monasticism. Was born in 251 and he lived 105 years in the desert, fasting on bread and water all his adult life. And he's went into the first one to really go deep into the desert and to live a life of prayer and fasting and some manual work, weaving palm leaves into mats and doing some gardening and just praying for the conversion of the world. And he lived during the time of Diocletian, and he would go and try to comfort the Christians who were in prison and who were about to suffer martyrdom, and he wanted to suffer martyrdom himself. And he was tried to provoke it at times by going and speaking even to the governor, who told him to stop speaking to the Christians, and yet he wasn't able to obtain that prize. But he was a wealthy man. His parents died when he was 18, and he had a younger sister that he had to take care of. But he meditated upon the teachings of Jesus in poverty, and especially when Jesus said to sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have riches in heaven, and then come follow me. He was meditating on that, and then he went into a church and heard that very, very gospel. And so from there he actually gave away most of his money and saved a little for himself and his sister. And then the next day he heard the gospel, don't worry about tomorrow. So he gave the rest away and put his sister into a convent and then he just found a little hut outside the outskirts of the city and lived there doing charitable works, doing some manual labor and dedicating himself to prayer and fasting. And the people were so impressed by him that they called him the friend of God and would go to him for some advice. But he too was still trying to grow in wisdom and closeness to God. So he'd go, whenever he heard about a holy man, he would go visit that person to try to acquire some of his virtue and the different virtues that we all have. So he would go and try to acquire all the virtue and all the knowledge and wisdom that he could from every holy man, and he would come back and put it into practice, not just be satisfying his curiosity. He would put it into practice and help make himself grow in virtue as well. And so he did. And at this time, as Satan saw him growing in holiness and was fearing his holiness, he would attack him with temptations to boredom and sins of the flesh and different temptations that he would resist through prayer and fasting, and until he was visited by the devil, who beat him senseless, beat him to the point of unconsciousness, and he was so terribly shaken by this. And his friends took him to the church. And he actually prayed to God, asking him, "Why would you let this happen to me?" And he was very discouraged. But our Lord spoke to him and said that I will, from now on, since you didn't give in to these temptations, I will be with you from now on, forever. And so that encouraged him, and he went deeper into the desert, and he found an old Roman fort abandoned, and he locked himself in there, and he stayed there for 20 years, just living that same kind of life, growing closer and closer to God through the life of prayer. And people would his friends would come to him and give him a little bread. He lived on a few loaves of bread for 6 months at a time. And his friends would come and speak to him through the crack in the door. He wouldn't open the door to anyone. And this was for 20 years. And his friends at one point worried about him and broke open the door to go and check on him, and found him in perfect health and calm. And they asked him to come into the city and speak to the people there and bring wisdom of God to the people. And so he did, and that's when he found many Christians who were suffering from persecution and martyrdom, and he would comfort them and try to obtain that prize himself. But then he went back to his fort and stayed there again, same kind of life. But people were flocking to him more and more because they came to know him more from his coming back into the city. And he was afraid that he would give in to pride and fame. So he went deeper into the desert. But still his friends sought him out. And it was then that he built these monastic communities for these people. Hundreds of people flocked to him and in the deep desert. And he taught them. They would not live in the kind of religious life we live today, but they would live a loosely eremitic life, and they would come together for talks of Saint Anthony would give, and then they would go off and go and live by themselves in their caves and wherever they lived. But he was the father of them all. And he lived till the age of 105, and Saint Anthony, Saint Athanasius went out to visit him and spent a lot of time with him. Saint Anthony too was expelled by the emperor for his fighting the Arian heresy, and Saint Anthony too helped Saint Anthony to fight that heresy. So Saint Athanasius came to know Saint Anthony very well and wrote a book on his life and spread it everywhere, and that's how people came to know Saint Anthony and went out to see him and to live with him and to become monks. And so monks populated the desert areas, thousands of them, starting especially from Saint Anthony. So he have his life of prayer and fasting, and especially this solitude to go out and be alone with God, something that we can put into practice in our day as well. This solitude, being alone with God, whether it be in prayer in our own room at home or in some places. Especially today we need that in our busy life and the life of TV and computers and music and all these distractions, and this, especially in America, where entertainment is so widespread and in such strong ways, where we can't get alone in quiet times. We have to learn to do that, and because that's where God is found. God is found in silence and in solitude. When we set our lives apart for God, we spend time for Him and with Him. And then He will speak to our heart, and then He will give us grace and enlightenment and wisdom to live a holy life. So let us, we need to bring that back into our society, into our own private lives, however we can do that. Let us ask the intercession of Saint Anthony today.